Hi, this is Barry. Welcome to Simplicity Zen podcast. Today I have Geoff Keeton. He's an assistant teacher at the Zen Center of Denver. Thank you for joining us, Geoff.
Sure, thank you.
Could you talk a little bit about your current role at the Zen Center of Denver? Not so much the history leading up to it, but just what you're doing right now, and then we'll get to the history later, if that's okay.
Yeah, the at the beginning of the year, I started doing daisan, which is like the kind of and it's a doksan in a way, but we just don't work with koans or anything unless we're kind of appointed to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm doing daisan with students that come in and ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
I've been giving talks. And
Mm-hmm.
I've been leading the SAMU, as well as I've done 2 Dharma talks and then done 2 SAMUs.
Great.
And I'm just kind of, I'm kind of the all around person. I'm the AV person a lot. So with Zoom.
Yeah. So did you grow up in the Denver area or somewhere else?
Yeah, I was born in Denver actually, and then lived most of my life in Thornton. Moved to Arvada at some point, lived in Fort Collins for a while, which is north of Denver.
Mm-hmm.
And now I live in Lakewood, which
Mm-hmm.
is on the west side of Denver, a western suburb.
That's not where they had the fires recently, was it? That'd be more of the east, the
It was
northeast,
north.
right?
It was actually north of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
The big one with 1,000, where they lost 1,000 homes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That was closer to Boulder, right?
Yes.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that was right in the winter too. That was just crazy.
It's really dry here, and I expected they were afraid yesterday we were going to have more fires.
Hmm.
Where I work is just ready to go up. So
What kind of work do you do now, if you don't mind sharing?
I work as a nurse and I work in hospice.
Oh,
So,
wow. So you probably suffered the brunt of it the last couple of years.
yes,
Yeah, can only imagine.
I've mainly worked in long-term care, but
Huh.
it was devastating.
Hmm. Sorry, let me turn off my thing here. Um, So did you grow up in a two-parent home, lower class, poor, middle class,
No,
what was kind of your background?
I grew up, uh, my parents split up when I was about 2.5 years old, but they were always focused on me. So even though they didn't get along, um, they were still around me uh, all my life, really. And my dad actually lives with me now.
Mhm.
Um, the I mainly grew up and lived in went to Highland High School, and then at a certain point, I moved from there in Thornton to Arvada, which
Mhm.
is another suburb, and lived there for 3-4 years, and then went to school in Fort Collins.
Mhm.
Um, the I initially lived with my mom, and then when I was about 14, I moved to my father's and stayed with him because I
Mhm.
was fighting with my mom.
Mhm.
And I the only thing I really remember during that time was when I was probably around 15 years old. Something started like inside me to read about the Buddha,
Mhm.
and I read the uh, God, it's been a long week for me.
Mhm.
But I read one of the sutras and I didn't understand it.
Mhm.
Um, the Mahaka, Mahakash, Mahaprajna Paramita Hridaya Sutra.
Okay.
And, and I got to the point where the Bodhisattva Kanon saw the emptiness of all the 5 skandhas, that part. And I just was like, I don't know what this means at all.
Mhm.
And I think it kind of set me out later on to, seek more. I don't know why, but
I mean,
I
that's a
just remember.
crazy. Oh, please go ahead. Sorry.
I, I, I think that later on, and then certain people kind of influenced me in my life,
Mhm.
so that later on I pursued Zen.
I mean, that's a crazy advanced introduction to Buddhism. I mean,
Yeah, and I
even
did
someone
not
who's been
understand.
practicing years, that could be inscrutable,
And that was the kind of well, it was in our dictionary or our encyclopedia we had at school. And I was
Mhm,
just like, I'll read about this and find out about it. And then I was
mhm.
like, I don't have a clue.
Had you
And
heard of Buddhism before?
well, that then I did, but
Uh-huh.
and I was really into reading.
Hmm.
I read a lot of Nietzsche and a lot of philosophy.
In
And
high
then I
school?
went to in high school.
Wow, that's crazy.
I went into college, and a couple of friends of mine kind of pushed me into taking some philosophy classes.
Hmm.
And I was actually a major in, first I went into accounting, then I was music, and then I was just kind of like done. And I said, I'll finish as music. But I took a lot of other classes, and one of the classes was actually mysticism in the East and West.
Hmm.
And we actually had a Zen uh, student who came in one day and talked to us in the class. It was very interesting.
You remember who it was by chance? Probably not, right?
Oh no, this is in the like probably 1990. It's a
Hmm.
long time ago,
Hmm.
somewhere around then. And um, it was an American who had studied as a priest in Japan,
Hmm.
and then had come back. And I'm not really sure if he ever really set up anything, because we didn't. Later on, I think we were the only Zen. Uh, we were doing some classes in CSU, which is Colorado State University,
Hmm.
at some point, but there was nobody else who was practicing there, so I think he left.
Hmm.
Um, but it was an interesting class, and I really actually enjoyed it, parts of it.
Do you
Um,
guys talk about like Meister Eckhart and
yeah.
Sufis and stuff like that?
Um, the the woman that was kind of a contemporary of him, but a little bit later than him. Um, oh, I can't remember her name right
Not Joan
now.
of Arc.
No, no, no.
Yeah.
Uh,
She would have been way
um,
earlier, right? Yeah.
she was Hil- Hildegard of
Okay.
Bingen.
Hmm.
We studied her. Um, and then, I still didn't graduate, and I started doing transcendental meditation.
Hmm.
And just as um, I wanted to learn to relax,
Hmm.
to just, I guess, be more in the moment. And um, I think I did that about a year, and then I kind of stopped. And then I saw an advertisement in the Westward, which is like a local newspaper for Denver, about the Zen Center, and I went.
This what,
Um,
mid '90s maybe?
1991.
Hmm. And what
Um,
so growing up, did you have any sense of religious belief, or did you grow up
it,
atheist? Did your parents take you to church?
I grew up as a Mormon, and then at about 13, I became an atheist, and I was reading Nietzsche and that kind of stuff, and
Hmm.
uh, hated God, whatever that means.
Did you
But
ever
I
go
was
to
atheist, totally atheist.
did you ever go to the temple, or were you out before then?
I no, I never went to the temple.
Hmm. And
So
that was a big deal for your parents to divorce as Mormons. Wouldn't that be right?
yeah, especially for my mom. My mother and her mother and father never supported her,
Hmm.
and were angry.
Hmm.
You know, there's a lot of family issues that we had between her and her parents.
Hmm.
She was like she was the black sheep of the family. And then, she got divorced, and they would never stand for that. And I don't know. It wasn't until later that they kind of reconciled a little bit,
Hmm.
but it's just a little bit. So
Do you feel like you rebelled against the Church of Latter-day Saints at all?
Yeah,
Did you feel
yeah.
better towards it and stuff like that?
I didn't, I just didn't, I don't know. I wanted to, I guess, go up against something.
Mm-hmm.
I think was part of it. There's a part of yourself that kind of wants to rebel, and that was the way I did it.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom was like done with the church after she got divorced, so she never
Okay.
went back. I went with, did the preschool or the after school
Mm-hmm.
program that they had.
Mm-hmm.
But I was probably like 12 or 13, and I was like, I don't believe any of this. So,
Mm-hmm.
and I
Yeah.
actually went, and became more of like I don't know. Later on, I became Christian because I saw some of the power. I think, I read Job and some of the other books of the Bible, and just
And
saw
this is a teenager.
later on, probably about 20.
Okay.
I actually, you kind of reconcile in a way, I
Mm-hmm.
guess. Um, but I don't, when I think, I always listen to my teacher, when you're with a Christian, you're Christian.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's kind of the way I've always kind of approached it.
And were you still a Christian when you started the transcendental meditation? Was that simultaneous
No,
or
I was
sequential?
I was atheist then, and then yeah, I was atheist then. And,
Mm-hmm.
the transcendental meditation is just a meditation you do once a day. There's no religious association with it, so it's just you're practicing meditating. That's all.
Mm-hmm.
So
When you were a when you were like when you were a devout Christian, did you ever feel a sense of greater power or Holy Spirit or anything like that?
I think I wanted to see that. I wanted to feel that,
Mm-hmm.
but I never did.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I see the point of the teachings. You know what
Mm-hmm.
I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But and I see the power in that too.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that's what kind of pulled me back into that, was just being open, I think, more.
Mm-hmm.
And then having read like Hildegard of Bingen, um, I think that helped. We also read a lot of other stuff too. So
Mm-hmm. What do you think led to you falling away from Christianity?
I think it was that there wasn't really a practice.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way to open uh, the doors,
Mm-hmm.
so to speak, of the mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why I went to transcendental meditation, was to try to see, to try to open myself. And I'm kind of like that's oversimplifying it in a way, but
Right.
um, they're really complex things. So that's kind of a difficult place for me even think about, just kind
Yeah.
of would.
Did did you do you think the mysticism class? So you mentioned you wanted some sort of practice or some sort of doorway, some sort of
Yeah,
entrance. Do you think the mysticism class kind of ignited that flame, or where do you think that came from?
I think it opened me up a little bit and um, into looking more into myself.
Mm-hmm.
And we had read the one of the books we read was the Baal Shem,
Mm-hmm.
which is a Jewish mystic.
Mm-hmm.
And there was there's certain components of the story, that one of the stories in particular, where um, it's it's a story about a werewolf, and this man from the village has to see that thing is inside of himself. He lets it swallow him up, and then he is reborn the thing is reborn. And
Hmm.
it's, going against fear. In the face of fear, how do you live?
Hmm.
How do you live with peace in your own
Hmm.
heart?
Hmm.
And then also, um, being courageous in the face of total devastation. That's really hard.
Hmm.
So, to see that, um, that was one of the things. And then we studied Shankara, who is an Indian mystic, and that person also kind of like uh, pulled me out, I guess, and made me more interested. And I think there's something about karma that pulls you back.
Hmm.
There's something that um, there's something in your nature that has to answer those questions, the real questions of our life.
Hmm.
And um, for me, that uh, I think it just led me to Zen in a lot of ways.
In conducting these interviews and just talking to other people, you know, Dharma brothers and sisters,
Uh,
it seems like kind of people have slightly divergent kind of great doubts or motivations to get practice. Some people just they're suffering and they don't want to suffer. In
yeah,
Buddhism seems the way. Some people, like have a really specific existential fear, and that kind of drives it. Some people just kind of want to know the truth. Period. I want to
yeah.
know what's going on. Sounds maybe that's kind of where you were coming from, or is it a mixture of all of those? Or
It's kind of a mix of all of those. The One of the first things that kind of, I'd worked with my teacher for about a year, and I was actually doing a lot of sitting. And
this is when you
after I
first started
started,
Zen.
yeah,
Yeah.
when I first started Zen,
Hmm.
and I did session in the fall, and then at a certain point, things kind of changed, and I started to work on the koans.
Hmm.
And um, there was a certain point when normally I would not speak up or say anything, but I was like, I heard him talk about one of the death koans, which, one of the Dao's, I won't say, I won't
Hmm.
say. And I was like, I want that one. I want to work on that.
Hmm. Is this
You know,
before
because
Mu or?
before I was, at that level. And
Hmm.
so um, he actually took me through a series of the koans from like the Mumon Kon, the end of the Mumon Kon, there's the Tosatsu's three barriers.
Hmm.
And then um, he kind of took me through some of these other ones and we worked through them. And that was kind of initially, I think that was one of the things that I had to resolve.
Hmm.
And so is the question about life and death, because I actually almost died once and had been to the hospital a couple times for asthma.
Hmm.
And when you're so exhausted that you want to die because you can't breathe,
Hmm.
because you're just so tired because you
Is this
can't
as a,
breathe.
a kid or a teenager?
Yeah, this is a teenager. You
Hmm.
know, you you know what that the edge of life and death is
Hmm.
right there. And then one time I'd fallen into a river and almost died. And I was probably in the river for about 5 or 10 minutes, and pretty much my uncle thought I was dead.
Hmm.
Just because they couldn't get to me.
Hmm.
Um, we were rafting. I fell in the water. And at a certain point, I just realized in a big way that I was going to die. There's no way out of this.
Was this commercial rafting or just goofing around in the river with
We
family?
well, we had done a lot of rafting before, and we'd actually rafted really tough rapids, like on the Snake River,
Hmm.
but had never done anything. Uh, hadn't had any issues. We'd always like work it out, figure out what we needed to do, and then
Hmm.
go through the rapids.
Hmm.
And it was just a fluke rapid that flipped over our boat.
Where was
When
you guys are wearing
you
you were
couldn't
wearing
even
the life
see.
jacket?
everybody was wearing a life jacket. We always wear life jackets,
And what
but it
river was
doesn't.
this?
It's not the. Um, it's what comes from it turns into the Colorado River,
Okay.
but it's um,
Like Clear
the name
Creek
of
area?
it is, yeah, it's a tributary of it up above, and um, you know, it was just this fluke little rapid, and nobody even saw. And all of a sudden, everybody's in the water.
So did you get foot
And
trapped or what happened?
no, I
I, I'm a
was
ra- I'm a
flung.
rafting guide, so sorry.
Oh,
Okay.
I was flung clear across the river.
Okay.
When I came up clear on the other side of the river, there had been two kayakers who had died like in the last week, and
Hmm.
the river was really high,
Hmm.
and it was just this little, you know, everybody was going along, and then there was a little like pull down, and
Hmm.
what it did is it just pulled down a little bit, and then it flipped the boat up,
Okay.
and so everybody went wherever they went. My aunt was stuck with the rope around her foot,
Yikes.
and I was on the other side of the river. My uncle tried to jump in to get me.
So were you like holding a rock? Were you trapped under the
No,
water? Like
no,
what?
no. I was on clear on the other side of the river, just in with my
Hmm.
life jacket, trying to
Hmm.
stay up above the water. I
Okay.
was under for probably 3 minutes, I think,
Oh, wow.
and kicked. You know, I think just by luck, righted myself in the water,
Hmm.
and then kicked up because I couldn't breathe anymore. And then I got up above, and there were a lot of waves, and so I kept going through the waves as I was trying to breathe. And
Yeah.
so, you know, I just was like, "This is it."
Yeah. Yeah. It's
and
called flush drowning. I mean, it happens. Yeah.
and my uncle tried to jump in
Hmm.
to come over and get me, and he was like, he couldn't even swim. The water was so fast,
Hmm.
and um, eventually, like after a few more minutes, I came back to the other side.
Crazy.
So yeah, and you know, but in the middle of that, I just had this like spacious feeling where I was like, I'm gonna die. You know, no questions, just I'm gonna die in a very I guess existentialist way. And so that always drove me in Zen.
Hmm.
Uh,
Did you ever
that
go rafting again?
we went the next day and then not after that.
Yeah. That's
So
enough.
we did the same thing.
Hmm.
We avoided that side,
Yeah.
of course, but I do kayak sometimes down a
Okay.
river,
Hmm.
but it's always, you know, it's not when it's high or anything, it's when it's low. So
Can you Eskimo roll and stuff like that?
no, not quite that. It's usually I have a daughter and we'll go down the river. My wife will go sometimes go to see the eagles, bald
Hmm.
eagles. So,
Hmm.
but and
So,
I think that kind of was what kind of pushed me for a long time
mhm.
in my practice.
So when you were in the rapid and it dawned on you that this might be in your life, were you panicked? Was there a sense of peace? Was there a sense of just
Just despair.
neutrality,
No,
despair?
just tremendous despair. Like it just swallowed me up. You know, I mean, kind of like when you practice and you drop your
Hmm.
mind. You know,
Hmm.
it's just that's all there is,
Hmm.
so to speak.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that pushed me for a long time. Uh, and then it was about 2 years ago when COVID happened, and I worked in long-term care in a facility, and the this the job was just so stressful. There was just you could not you just can't imagine how um, just the whole range of existence and your experience that you never experienced before until you get to this moment when you're working and you know things are going bad, they're terrible, they go from bad to worse to get to worse than that. And um, so I think that's what uh, kind of, um, in a lot of ways, uh, you know, helped me to that great. It's a great amount of suffering
Hmm.
that you really can't describe it because you have to know it for yourself.
Hmm.
Um, and I see that now as I work. Um, you know, just the suffering is just everywhere. If you look,
Hmm.
you know, if you open your eyes, it's there. So,
Hmm.
and I think that's what um, that's kind of the stick in the back, I guess. Or I don't know how else to describe it, but um, you know, so it's kind of those two things. For a long time, I just kind of practiced along and did whatever I was doing, you know, whatever the teacher told me to do,
Hmm.
and then I had actually finished the process of the koans
Hmm.
years and years ago, and then finally um, the we I kept working on koans, so different from a different source.
What source
So
is that?
uh, the 300 koan Shobogenzo.
Oh, from Dogen. Yeah.
So and I work with my teacher on that now,
Hmm.
and then
Oh.
sometimes we flip around, so to speak.
So at what point did you know you wanted to be a nurse? Was that in college?
It was I had been I'd gone through college and finished, and then I had gotten out, and then did some different things. Went back to college, and then in the kind of the end of that, started a different type of job,
Hmm.
and then that kind of led to being in nursing. A couple of the nurses kept telling me that I worked with
Hmm.
kept telling me that you have to be a nurse, Geoff. You have to be a nurse.
They just thought you had the attributes to,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Were you working as some sort of caregiver, or was it
yeah,
more a technical
yeah.
role? Okay.
I was working with people that have developmental disabilities.
Hmm.
So, um, and that's in a lot of ways, it's very rewarding and very beneficial for people. It's that's a great job
Hmm.
too. But they kept telling me I needed to go to school and become a nurse.
So you
So
did
I
it.
did,
Yeah.
and
So
it is
you, what's that?
it's a great thing to be.
Hmm. Um, so you were in college, you had the mysticism class, you started doing the transcendental meditation. What were you doing? Yoga? Were you doing qigong? Was there any other practices in your life at that point?
No, I did Tai
Karate?
Chi a lot. Yeah,
Yeah.
Tai Chi. And
Uh-huh.
I still do it some, but not very
Hmm.
much. But I really enjoy Tai Chi.
Hmm.
Um, I don't do it as a like a practice where I go once a week to do it, but
Hmm.
it's just something that I kind of do on the side.
When you did that, was that influential in your practice at all? Was there any sort of spiritual or mystical component of it, or was it just kind of a nice, relaxing, aesthetic thing to do?
You know, it was um, it, initially it's a way to kind of like even out your uh, samadhi.
Hmm.
Especially during session, I tend to do it a lot.
Hmm.
And it kind of like enables you to kind of like, you can be like totally up here and it'll just kind of bring you down so you're calm again.
Hmm.
Um, you know, and you can focus a little bit better. Uh, and it's a good thing to do, you know, if you're having a lot of stress, it's a
Hmm.
very good thing to do
Hmm.
because it can take you out of, a lot of times when you're just doing sitting, you're facing it, you're facing your stress.
Right.
And sometimes you can't.
Hmm.
There's sometimes when you need to move away from that.
Hmm.
And so that's kind of a neat thing to be able to, you're still kind of practicing, but you're, doing a um, kind of evening out the tone of your mind. So,
Hmm.
and I like it for that. So I exercise every day too, and
Hmm.
get on a treadmill or I try to bike.
Hmm.
And I consider those kinds of the same things.
Right.
They're just trying to um, even out the mind.
Hmm. Did so what brought you from, did you do TM for a while, or did you go pretty quickly into Buddhism? What was the trigger
It was
that
about a
caused that
year.
transition?
It was about a year, and then I saw the thing for. Um, it was just an ad in one of the papers. I was like, I'll go try that.
For
So I
Zen
did.
at
Yeah,
the Zen Center of Denver.
Zen Center of Denver. Yeah.
Mhm. Who was the
So
teacher at that point?
uh, Henry Danan Roshi.
Okay, and
Yeah,
he's Sanbo Kyodan. Is that correct?
yeah. He's from Philip Kapleau, and
Oh,
then
okay,
he went and studied with Robert Aiken.
I see. Did he get
Yeah.
transmission from Aiken? Do you know?
He was he finished all of this stuff, but I don't know if he was transmitted to by Aiken. I
Hmm.
know that Aiken came to our place, so I would think that he probably was given transmission.
Hmm. What were your initial impressions of that when you showed up?
You know, just this really tall guy.
Hmm.
he, he was very tall, and he just stood straight up, and he was like, I don't know, 80 years old. But it was
Oh,
just
okay.
really incredible to see this. Just he was pretty um, friendly and everything, but at the same time, there was just like there's definitely a presence there.
Hmm. Yeah,
So
it's a very common pattern where it won't be what the teacher says or what or anything like that. People just get like an intuitive sense, like something's going on here, and it's almost like a tactile sense.
yeah.
I've noticed it's a very common thing that grabs people with Zen. They'll read about it and it'll be interesting, but when they kind of meet someone who's been practicing for a while and that's kind of emanating that presence, that seems to really hook a lot of people.
So and
Did
then go ahead, go ahead.
I want to hear what you wanted to say?
Um, Danon transmitted to my teacher. He transmitted it through the three teachers
Hmm.
at the Zen Center. And then I finished with Ken Morgareidge, who's my teacher now.
Hmm. Was he
So,
there practicing when you first showed up?
yes.
Had he been
And
transmitted yet, or
the what?
had he been already transmitted when you showed up, or was that to come
No,
later?
no, that was later.
Yeah. And what was this? What was the scene like at the Zen Center? Did people wear robes? Was it pretty lay
It
oriented?
was we all wore robes.
Uh-huh.
Even the new people, we'd make them wear a robe.
Hmm.
Um, and it had come from Philip Kapleau,
Hmm.
and so it was very, very strict and rigorous.
Hmm.
There was they didn't do quite the things that they did at the Zen Center of
Rochester.
yeah, Rochester. Yeah,
Hmm.
they didn't do the same things, but it was very rigorous and
Hmm.
pushy. And uh, the session started at like 10 to 4. It was crazy.
Hmm. And did you practice a while before you did your first session, or did you pretty much dive in?
Oh, about 7 months, something like that.
Hmm. What
So
did the difficulty of it take you by surprise, or did you know what to expect a little bit?
I really wasn't prepared as a student.
Hmm.
Um, and I have like health issues that I'd never really kind of put together and said, oh, you're not doing enough. But you kind of go along with the flow.
Hmm.
And sometimes that's not to the best for the best. But um I didn't mind it at all. So, and you just kind of go with it and see where it goes. So,
Hmm.
but it was there wasn't anything like in Rochester. There was a lot of like where they would cause the students even bloody, shoulders because of the Kiyosaku.
Right.
Yeah, and they didn't ever do that at our center. They did do where they would watch if somebody was sleeping, they'd hit them.
So it
But
wasn't just they would initiate it. It's not just people who requested it.
yeah, and then eventually it got to where we would just request, and then at a certain point we just stopped it completely.
Hmm.
So
What the first time you saw Zen service, what did you think about that?
you know, I think I was just really one of the first um, things I went to was a Kenneth ceremony, and it was just a gorgeous experience. And I didn't understand, who Kenneth was,
Hmm.
but I could, you hear it in the words,
Hmm.
not necessarily the words themselves, but you hear, and it was really, it really kind of took me by surprise, and just you realize that this thing is about your heart being
Hmm.
open, and um, I think that's to put it probably more than I was thinking about it at first, but it was quite a surprise to me.
Hmm.
This is one of the purposes of what we do is to know Kano, so to
Hmm.
speak. It's a gorgeous thing.
Hmm.
So
And did you just show up and start sitting? Did they give you beginner instruction? Like, what was
yeah,
your introduction?
we we had gone to a seminar.
Hmm.
So and then on Saturday we went to the seminar and they invited us on Sunday.
Hmm.
And then on Sunday, we sat, we listened to the Tay show, and I didn't understand what was truly being said. And
Hmm.
then I started going like once a week, or like I would go on Sunday and then go once a week. So
When you first started doing Zen meditation, did it seem a continuation of your TM meditation, or did it seem different? Did it hit
it
differently?
seems similar, but it was different because I was counting the breaths, and
Hmm.
um, TM was just about saying they gave you uh,
A
like a
mantra?
little, yeah, and you would just say it over and over and over.
Hmm.
And so it was different because of that. And sometimes I would do that. Sometimes I would do counting the breath.
Hmm.
So
Was it, did the embodied experience seem different? I mean, did it seem like, okay, this is yet just more meditation I'm doing, but in a different context? Or did the way it make you feel, was it different at all?
the way it made me feel was different.
And
Because you're sitting and you're doing it with the legs crossed,
hmm.
and you have this mudra. The
Hmm.
whole,
Or mantra?
the whole kind of thing is there
Hmm.
with Zen
Oh,
versus
I
TM.
see what you mean.
With
Yeah.
TM, you're just kind of sitting there in a chair,
Uh-huh.
and there's no real, you sit there for about 20 minutes, then you go.
Hmm.
And in Zen, you sit, you sit, you sit.
Hmm.
So that was much more, it was interesting. And I think I did it an all day, and then I started to do more.
Hmm.
And there was something in there that was bringing me back.
Hmm.
So
Did you have any early kind of, for lack of a better word, like mystical experiences or samadhi states or anything like that kind of threw you or anything?
yeah, and I didn't know what to do.
Hmm.
So that was um the especially in that session, I kind of came apart
Hmm.
and almost left at some point.
Hmm.
because I didn't know how to deal with it. And I didn't know how to, the teacher was pretty, the only time you went to Doksan initially when you were, brand new is they would have you go on the fourth day, and then he'd see you the night before the end of session. And so I just never went to session, and I didn't know how to deal with what I was going through.
You
And
never went to Dokusan, do you mean, or?
I only went to it on the fourth day, and I was having a lot of pain, but I was okay. And then, like the last night, I was coming apart.
Like
And
emotionally.
I didn't know how to, deal with it. And that's why, like, doing this Tai Chi is good because your mind has to kind of, have a little bit of relaxation and kind of let back a little bit, know how to rest. And I think I've learned that since is how important that is to your practice in general and also, your life. If you can't rest, it's a problem. And I'm always, I think, been like the kind that pushes and pushes and pushes. And that's not, eventually your hair falls out.
What so how long did you do the breath counting before you moved on to a different stage of practice, would you say?
Probably the next year.
Okay.
So, and then he gave me Shikantaza. Um, do you want me to go on from there? Like what happened next?
Yeah,
So
please.
Shikantaza, and then I had an experience.
Like an opening.
Yeah, and
Doing from Shikantaza.
from Shikantaza.
Like during
And
sitting, or like just going about your life, or?
I was sick. I was really, really sick. And I was reading the Huineng Sutra, the Six Patriarch Sutra. I didn't understand a couple words. You kind of read through it and you read through it and you read through it. And then you kind of get to a couple words you don't understand. And then you're like, and I had been really like I'd gotten, it was probably the flu or something like that. And I was so sick. And I was just like, I'll just sit up. I'm not going to meditate. I'll just sit up and read this, and then lay down for a while. And I had the experience, and then he said, okay. And then he said, go back to Shikantaza. And then, do you want me to keep going?
Yeah, well, actually, let me
Is that
ask you about
okay?
that. So the opening, if you're comfortable talking about it, like how did that differ from others and experiences that you'd had before? Like what made that seem
So
unique?
all of a sudden, I was like trying to figure out what these words meant, and I couldn't get it. And like my mind kind of stopped. And then the next moment, I was so grateful and I was crying. Here I am. I'm so sick. And then in the middle of this, just something opened, and I don't know what it was. And all of a sudden, I was crying, and you kind of say like you understand it in your own mind, whether you do or not. But and then I told him, and he's like, "I'll go back to Shikantaza." And then that's a long time ago, so I really just understand that kind of basic experience. And then go ahead.
Oh, I was going to ask you, did you stay with Shikantaza for a while?
Yeah, and then one day I was sitting right before Tai Chi. We were doing Tai Chi as a group,
At
and
the Zen Center?
and one of the guy who led it was just walking past, and I had this experience where I was walking past, and and then I told him, and he started me working on the koans.
And
So
And it sounded like you didn't start with Mu, you started with some more advanced koans first. Did I understand that part right,
So
or did I misunderstand?
yeah, actually what he did was he had me work on a move then,
Okay, I see.
and then go on from there
Hmm.
to the other koans, and then he had me go back to the introductory koans after we finished the first book.
Hmm.
So we skipped the second one and then did that last.
Okay, the second you mean the blue
And
cliff
in the woman,
record?
yeah, in the woman guan,
Okay,
we skipped the second koan, but then did the rest, and then went back to the second koan at the end. And then after that,
okay.
he had me go back to the introductory koans,
Hmm.
and then to the blue cliff record.
Hmm.
Yeah.
When you were going through the different koan analogies, did you feel they had different, like, did the Mumonkan koan seem different than the blue cliff koans and so on, or did it all kind of just seem like a like kind of a similar flow? Because the blue cliff record koans are longer and more involved. I mean, did it feel differently, or was it just kind of a continuous experience for you?
It felt different, I
Hmm.
think, because it's more about the um, they're different quality,
Hmm.
and also we did not do uh, the parts that go around the koan.
Like the
The
verse and
uh,
stuff like that.
yeah, the verse and the other parts. Sometimes he would have me
Commentaries.
work on the verse, but
Hmm.
when we went through the first book, the Movement Koan, he had me do all the verse and the what was the other part? The
Commentary.
commentary, yeah.
Uh-huh.
And so um, that was just and then when we got to the second book, the Blue Cliff record, we did just the koan itself, and then sometimes we would do some of the verses.
Hmm.
So, but he just had me work on it that way, and then eventually he retired, and I um, started working with my teacher now, Ken
What was
Morgareidge.
what was his name again? I'm sorry.
Ken Morgareidge.
Okay. Okay.
So,
And how was his teaching style different, if at all, if it was?
he's had um, he lost his wife, and so his he's just a different. He's very um, kind of exact,
Hmm.
and what would I put it? He knows his stuff. Like
Hmm.
if there's more information, like in the background kind of thing, he'll
Hmm.
know all that information. He's
Hmm.
kind of like a dictionary of Buddhism,
Hmm.
is what I
And
always thought.
he
I
did
had
white
known
plum as
him.
well. Is that right?
No, he did from Aiken.
Okay,
So the other side, yeah.
I get it. Okay, and and you still work with him now?
Yeah.
Hmm. And and so all this, sounds like you have a kid. Are you married?
Yes.
So you have so you're practicing Zen. You're married. You're working as a nurse. How often would you be able to get away for sesshin and stuff like that?
It kind of depends. I usually do one Zazen Kai a month.
Hmm.
My daughter's a teenager, and so she doesn't
More
want to have
independent.
much to do with me.
Yeah.
So it's just like I usually do a Zazen Kai once a month.
Hmm.
I usually see my teacher once a week, and then whenever a session comes up, and they aren't very often, I'll do a session.
Hmm.
So I'm going in the summer. But last year, right before I started back to this job,
Hmm.
into this job,
Hmm.
I did like 4 sessions during November and December.
Wow.
So 3 of them were online.
Hmm.
So but you just try to do them as best you can. So
Hmm.
when they're online, and then the well, I guess that would have been online too, yeah, because we hadn't opened up yet.
Hmm. Does your wife practice?
No. She's Seventh-day Adventist. She's
What
Christian.
what does she think about all this?
She, she says it's confusing,
Yeah. Yeah.
which
Sometimes
is fine. But
yes. So,
it's funny because she's Asian and
mhm,
I'm white,
mhm.
and um, it's kind of backwards is what she says, because she's the one that's the Christian and I'm the one that's the Buddhist. So instead of being the other way around, so but she supports it totally, and I think that's been a great help for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, my wife doesn't practice, but I think she puts up with it because it makes me much less of a jerk. I think she's like, she sees that, she sees the actual, something out of it. So, because I mean, it's disruptive to the family. I'm often disappearing for a weekend or a week, or, I have 3 weeknights a week. I have some sort of Dharma commitment. I mean, so I mean, it's impactful on the family, but, I think they kind of put up with it because they see it working a little bit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's also incredibly helpful in times of turmoil
Hmm.
for her and for my daughter.
Hmm.
So
Has
it can be a great benefit.
how's your family handled COVID, the whole process of
Just been
that?
a struggle. We haven't officially gotten it. I may have gotten it a couple times,
Hmm.
but it was always negative when I got tested. So,
Hmm.
and I you can't um, go off that. But she's never gotten sick, and I don't think my daughter has either.
Hmm.
Um, and we have gotten vaccinated. Our The Zen Center of Denver requires you be boosted,
Hmm.
not just vaccinated but boosted, and so um, and that's actually wonderful because the um, county of Denver actually allows us more leeway
Hmm.
because everyone's boosted.
Hmm.
So, but it's really been devastating. It's been devastating, like on her church. She's had a lot of people get really sick, and it's so expensive to get sick. Even if you have insurance, it
Hmm.
doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to pay for your bills. You
Really?
know, yeah. And if you don't have insurance, like we had a friend of one of the members of her church got it and got a $400,000 bill.
Really? Wow.
So the it's actually been in a lot of ways for a church, it's been a good thing because they have kind of pulled together more in some ways.
Hmm.
um and in nursing, COVID's just been devastating for nursing.
Hmm.
It's just uh even in hospice, it's just been just terrible. So
Could you talk a little bit about your hospice, working at a hospice career?
yeah,
What led you to that?
it was actually fortune. I'd worked in hospice before, and then the facility I was working at, I was just tired of working there.
Hmm.
And I was like, I'm gonna, see if I can get a job doing something else. And I found a person online who was kept trying to get me a job.
Hmm.
And so the facility I work with now, it's a temp. This job is a temp job, and that's because it's up in the mountains, and it just has a lot of resources. And so, if you live up in the mountains, it might be okay, but if you don't, it's really expensive.
Hmm.
And it was just kind of I had done it before, and I really actually enjoyed it, but I was working on the night shift, and
Hmm.
night shift is really hard on your system and on your body.
Hmm.
And I did that for about a year, and I said, I'm done. And then I went through COVID with the facility I was at. I broke my arms, both my elbows last year,
At the same
biking.
time?
Yeah,
Do you say biking? Like
and
mountain biking?
biking, just biking in Denver,
Okay.
and ended up having to take a leave of absence from my job, and then found a different job
Hmm.
doing hospice. And I really enjoy it. um, it's hospice is kind of a lot of times for the families, it can be a shock because they're all of a sudden put in a situation where they aren't prepared for what's going on,
Mm-hmm.
and having someone around to help you is so beneficial to them.
Mm-hmm.
It is um, just when you've gone through that experience and you know it, because they're like the deer in the headlights. And for a lot of patients, they've never had anyone die around them,
Mm-hmm.
and it can just be brutal.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I've kind of, you see that side of it. Sometimes people are ready,
Mm-hmm.
but by far most of them are not prepared. And, they've never
The
asked the
patient, you mean?
questions, the
The patient.
patients as well as the family.
Mm-hmm.
And, sometimes you have to go in and remind the patient that, hey, this isn't going to end well. We're getting close.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't believe you.
Really?
You still have to say it.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's not such the nicest thing to say, but
Why do you have to say it?
because otherwise they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
You know, um, you kind of go merrily along, and then because it's more of a social worker kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
but um, we, if you don't say it, then no one knows.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's like to be there with the family and to know this is what's going on. You
Mm-hmm.
have to be like, for example, I had a patient on Thursday and Friday. He took a downturn, and all of a sudden, and the wife is like, I know that this might be the end. You know,
Mm-hmm.
he may not get better than this.
Mm-hmm.
And so she understands that. But a lot of people, they kind of go along and they go along and they think that they're just going to live forever, even though they're on hospice.
Mm-hmm.
And
They're just not facing reality.
yeah, and that's okay. That's okay for them not to, but we also have to kind of pull them in and say, hey, let's not fly across the country,
Mm-hmm.
so to speak,
Right.
with your mom, who probably will die on the plane. It's that kind of knowing, and then at the same time, hospice gives them the opportunity to take the things that are not going right and to put them into a better light, or to try to tie everything together with the patient and the family so
Mm-hmm.
that it is a good experience and they're comfortable and there's no pain.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the, and if they're short of breath, there's no shortness of breath, or they're comfortable with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so for a lot of people, they've never done that. They've
Mm-hmm.
never had to make those decisions like, hey, I need to talk to the lawyer
Mm-hmm.
because, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, what do we do?
Mm-hmm. Do
Um,
chaplains come around?
yes.
Mm-hmm. Do, being a senior Zen practitioner, do you ever find your role kind of almost organically kind of gravitates towards the chaplain role, or is there pretty stark demarcation?
I actually would like to be a chaplain, but the issue is, like, you have to do so much schooling
Mm-hmm.
that um, I just couldn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, but at the same time, I know that, um, just by being with people, there's a, a lot of people live their lives and they aren't with the person in front of them,
Mm-hmm.
and um, and sometimes it's very hard to be, trying to pull everyone together and saying, this is what's going on, and you need to, if there's anything that needs to be said, it needs to be said now,
Mm-hmm.
because tomorrow grandma's not going to be responsive.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's not just that, but it's being there with people. And um, in a lot of it, you have to separate yourself. But there are moments when you can just let it go. And I think that's the most important thing in people's lives, is to see that, because they've lived their whole life without it. They've lived their whole life being separated. And so I don't know if I could, you just don't get that patient contact being a chaplain.
Right. And do
So
you,
go ahead.
sorry. Do, how do I articulate this? Is there any way, sorry, do you feel that, I mean, you kind of hit on it a little bit, but do you think there's any ways that your Zen practice has influenced your work, and or the way your work has influenced your Zen practice? Like, how, it's probably no accident you're working there, I mean, like, how do you feel that they, what is the mix there? How do they work together?
Um, I think before, and I kind of go round and round. Sometimes there's a separation.
Hmm.
Um, and sometimes the way that my job is now, I'm working about 50 hours a week,
Hmm.
and it's usually probably more like 55.
Hmm.
And that's just crazy. Like this morning, I was doing 2 hours of paperwork that needed to be finished, because,
Hmm.
and it used to be I'd kind of separate myself from it and didn't like to do whatever I was doing,
Hmm.
and it's exhausting, and it's very painful. Uh, because I drive to people's houses, and I drive probably 100 miles a day, maybe sometimes 200.
Oh, so do you
I
do
go around.
outpatient? Oh,
Yeah,
I didn't realize that. This whole time I was picturing you at a
yeah,
hospice center. So you mostly do outpatient. I see.
yeah.
Hmm.
And it just, I don't know. Maybe a couple of weeks ago, I just realized that you can't separate yourself from it. You just have to let it be.
Hmm.
You can't not like it. You have to kind of just let it go, and you
Hmm.
just do what you have to do.
Hmm.
So, because we probably do, for every hour of patient care, we do an hour of charting, sometimes an hour and a half.
Hmm.
And so, um, it just, your brain is empty by the end of the day, totally. And I'm so burnt out. I
Hmm.
mean, but I have 3 more months to go.
Do you think do you ever get compassion fatigue?
Yeah.
Hmm. That seems
Um,
common with almost anyone working in a healthcare
yeah.
setting.
And that's the thing, is like, it's to know, there has to be, you have to let your mind go.
Hmm.
You have to, um, 2 weeks ago, we had a meeting, and they were asking us, what happened to us in the last day or whatever,
Hmm.
just to share with everybody. And I was like, in the middle of the, some of the patients have been having a real hard time. And kind of what I said was, I was getting all my stuff into the car, getting ready to go. And I turned on the car so it'd warm up a little bit. And it's, and the music is playing, and I'm hearing music from the Mission, which is
Hmm.
really one of the most beautiful pieces of music ever.
Hmm.
It's a classical music written by Ennio Morricone. And I was just like, just took me away, in that moment. And you
Hmm.
have to have moments like that around.
Hmm.
Because if you can't just drop your mind, you will, there's just no way you can do nursing, I think.
Hmm.
It's just too overwhelming. There's too many, um, it's just bad. Every day is bad. And I've lived through that, and sometimes hospice is totally that,
Hmm.
where you're just looking at this situation and you're just saying, oh my God, what are we gonna do? But you have to go back,
Hmm.
you know. And that's the same thing with practice. You have to go back. And that's, I think my practice has changed in a lot of ways.
Hmm.
So
Could you, in what
from
ways would you say?
when I practice, I don't, um, I kind of work on my koans and then
Hmm.
I work on things I'm doing, but I don't, like I used to use the koans as like the mantra,
Hmm.
and that's gone. I can't do that anymore. I can do it for like 2 minutes and then I just let it go. I'm
Hmm.
just with my experience,
Hmm.
not with, um, I'm not counting, I'm not doing anything.
Hmm.
I'm just here in this moment without thinking about it.
Hmm.
And so that allows, I think, the suffering to come in and be present. You know, I
Hmm.
also do some Nikon, which is a different type of Buddhism sometimes too.
Could you, what is this?
Nikon, Naikan.
Never heard of it, I don't think.
Uh, it's a form of um, Jodo Shinshu Buddhism,
Oh, okay.
and it's you ask yourself three questions: What was I given today? What did this person give to me? What did I do for this person is the second question. Then the third question is, what pain and trouble did I cause this other person?
Hmm.
So sometimes I do that too. But most of the time I'm just being, so to speak.
Um, so you've kind of switched over to you're kind of switching over to a teaching role. Can you
Yeah.
talk a little bit about what that experience has been like?
You um, it was, there was something in me that started to push out. There was
Hmm.
something that started to come out, and it was, when I would hear people talk,
Hmm.
there was just, I wanted more. And it's to push up to the edge, and then to say that has been my goal, is to be able to express that. And
Hmm.
it is not something that comes, that is a natural thing in myself. It's
Hmm.
not something that I normally do. I'm a very shy person.
Hmm.
Um, but it comes out and you say it, you just have to say it and you have to express it. And um, that's, I think, one of the most important things of your practice.
Hmm.
At a certain point, that comes into play. And it's not that I've never been a person, I mean, I hated giving talks
Hmm.
before. Uh, like when I was younger, that was the last thing on my mind that I would do.
Hmm.
Um, but when it comes from something that's internal that you don't know where it's from, that it's just there and it just says, this is what you need to say,
Hmm.
that's different.
Hmm.
That's, the expression of emptiness as emptiness.
Hmm.
And so I think that's kind of what turned around in me.
Hmm.
And then can't remember when it was, but I kind of talked to my teacher, and then um, I had talked to uh, we, you know, the other teachers. We had it's kind of a confusing thing, so I'm not going to go into it. But I had talked to one of the other teachers during session last year, and then she said, "Why don't you give a talk?" And so then I started to give talks.
Hmm.
So, and we're kind of still getting back from COVID
Hmm.
um, as a sangha, and
Hmm.
so like a lot of times there's just all these new people, which is it's a good thing, but in another way, like we're kind of missing the old. people who knew what to do.
Right.
So it's been a change,
Hmm.
but it's kind of about that. The stuff just kind of comes out, and I think that's what kind of pushed me to want to say something.
Hmm. Did so right now you're not working on you're not guiding through people to koans. It's more introductory kind of informal talks. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Daisan is more for like questions about their practice.
Hmm.
They can ask a koan, but we don't have to. We can just say you can talk to the other teacher. If we don't want to work on it or whatever. But so they kind of give us leeway,
Hmm.
but most of the people mainly want to go see the teacher. So,
Hmm.
meet
Yeah,
the teacher, and that's fine. So,
that makes sense. Well, thank you so much. Before
sure.
we go, is there anything else you'd want to touch on, or anything about Buddhism or Zen you would like to talk about?
Anything? Say that again.
Is there
The
anything is there anything else you would want to touch on, or anything about Buddhism or Zen you would want to explore before we end here?
um, for myself, the one thing that I would want to say is, and this is from someone who practiced for a long, long time.
Hmm.
Just keep going,
Hmm.
and find the edge of your practice. I'm
Hmm.
sure you've heard that before, but that's it.
Hmm.
Find that edge and then pursue that, because that's where you'll find it. So I don't know. That said too much, I guess,
No, that's great.
but that's it. And um, just practice as hard as you can.
Yeah, sometimes I'll say to people, don't practice for you now, practice for your future self.
Yeah,
Even if you're not enjoying it right now, even if it seems pointless, your future self will thank you if you put in the work now. Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much. This has been wonderful.
Sure.
I really appreciate the time.
You guys have a good night. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.